So, good morning, good evening, wherever you're listening from. My name is once again Wande Adams. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Bob Africa and also a contributor on Leverage. As you know, Leverage is a platform that allows us to educate the public on what is going on in the tech ecosystem, what disruptors are doing to try to solve problems and, bridge gaps within our continent and our country. Today, I have with me a friend and one of the few people I look up to doing amazing things in the fintech space. Mr. Ayo Akindele is the co-founder and CEO. He's the founder and CEO. I'm already sharing this company with him. He's the founder and CEO of Kyshi. AY, as I popularly call him, and his friends call him AY. So, throughout the course of this interview, you might hear me call him AY. So AY, can you please just introduce yourself to our Leverage community? Tell us what you do, why, how, what's the madness that drove you into it, where the name came from, and all of that jazz.
Okay, well, pleasure being here. Thank you very much for the invitation. So my name is Ayo Akindele. As you said, people most identify me as AY. I'm the founder and CEO of Kyshi. The story of Kyshi, we could be here all day, but I'll try and break it down into as many bites as possible. So Kyshi was an obsessive idea that I've had for, I'd say about 12, 13 years by now. So I was in the UK. I'm still kind of half of the time in the UK, but I've spent most of my life in the financial services industry, in tech for that matter. I guess as a diaspora living in the UK, there was a big challenge that a lot of Africans had with sending money to and from Africa. And one of the things that I somehow got into was helping people send money back home. And then I just wondered whether there was a way I could, whether there was a way I could build a platform that would allow people to just sort of help themselves. So rather than coming to me all the time, which consumed so much of my time. And so I became obsessive about this idea of building a platform that would serve as a marketplace that would allow people in Africa and people in the diaspora to exchange money with one another. It was completely crazy and a whack idea and very kind of unorthodox from what money transfer was like back in these days. So, fast forward a few more years, I tried to come up with a name, and something that stuck was Kyshi. And for some of you in my generation or a bit older, maybe not the Gen Zs of today, would know what Kyshi and how we describe money back then as a slang. So I kind of just used that, jazz it up a little bit, added a Y in between, and called it Kyshi. So Kyshi, spelled Kyshi, is today a UK-based platform that helps businesses, global businesses and African businesses collect money across Africa. So I think, we've had quite a journey. We will be 4 years in July. I can consider us a leading player in the payment space. We've served consumer customers in the diaspora and in Africa. And now we feel like we are serving a much bigger vision and challenge of bridging the gap between the rest of the globe and Africa, and also how we can catalyze more intra-Africa trade. So today I'm proud to be a driver of that change, and with the rest of my team across the UK and Nigeria, we are reshaping sort of global trade for Africa. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
That's fantastic. What an introduction. So let's go into the challenge. So the one thing about Leverage that we really like is we dig deep into, the problem, the solution. We even talk about regulators. Our regulators are either impacting your business positively or if there's more that they can do. We don't bash regulators here.
Well, that's not regulatory bashing. Yeah.
But if there's more that they can do to make things easier for our consumers to, patronize us, right? And then we then look to the future, right? What, again, as a founder, I know that once we start these businesses, our initial idea and our initial customer sometimes will change. But the service that we're providing, that same customer changes, and we pivot as we learn along the way. Kyshi is 4 years old, and I'm sure you've learned a lot along the way, and now you're solving a bigger problem, right? So I'd like to know, what these challenges are, where you're going, what you've learned over the years, and how the regulators are helping or what they could do to help make things better.
Right. Okay. So, how do I tackle that? So I think, two ways. Okay. I'll definitely come back onto the regulators later on, but the first part is really big problem that Africans have. And sadly, it's not just for Africans in Africa, but also Africans in the diaspora. So, there's maybe some self-inflicted challenges that, we brought on ourselves being in the diaspora. Not everyone's always documented. So it makes it difficult for you to kind of have this financial footprint that allows financial services companies in the diaspora to identify you. And that can make it challenging for them to serve you and help you send money. Remittances and global sort of transfers of money is a very kind of delicate area. It's one that is really, really sensitive to all the financial institutions involved, as well as the regulators and other sort of security agencies, because it can be an avenue for money laundering and terrorism financing. And so, sadly, a lot of, historically too, Africa has been, part of those sort of regions that are quite susceptible to, to sort of tons of money laundering or terrorism financing. And so, so we kind of had looked at trying to solve that, being Africans ourselves, to think, okay, how do we identify people? How can we, with all the nuances that comes with, being African, even in the diaspora, because we saw that there was still a big opportunity to serve Africans and sending money to and from back home, those who wanted to do it legitimately. And so, whether we succeeded as much as we could have is up for debate. But I think, a bigger area is actually the 1.5 billion people in Africa who we feel are disconnected from global trade. And that's where we've, kind of come today. So Kyshi has morphed from a platform that serves consumers in the diaspora and in Africa, more so in the diaspora side. But now we see a way in which we can work with global brands, global businesses, but also serve 1.5 billion people. And that is what is more exciting to me. And that's what's brought us to where we are. Also, one factor that has certainly played a part in sort of the learnings and the journey that we've had is the impact that regulators have had. What makes it doubly challenging is that we are in a market, Africa, where there's 54 different countries, 54 different, countries with different sort of regulatory authorities, tax regimes, payment services. It's all fragmented. We've got like 40 something currencies across Africa, which is by far sort of the highest number of currencies in any continent in the world. So I think, regulators, I mean, I can speak a lot to Nigeria because we've experienced a lot of the sort of changes, policies, and up and down sort of, let's say, impacts that, they've had in our space. And with, in spite of all of that, we still have some great businesses that have thrived. And, but I think I want to be optimistic and look forward to the more, I'll say, positive policies that we are hopefully going to be seeing from the present regulators, the administrative sort of team of, like in Nigeria, Yemi Cardoso, and in other parts of Africa, like, Kenya, Ghana, and so on. But just the final point is that I actually really want to doff my hat to African innovators who have worked with regulators, and regulators have allowed them to thrive. We have some really world-class businesses coming out of Africa. We've led some really like global sort of technical advances when it's come to payments. Faster payments, things like NIBs is definitely an innovation that came out of Africa as part of the first in the world. There are markets like the US that doesn't have that.
Still a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, it's
that not until Zelle popped up.
Yep.
Interbank transfer in the US was not in existence.
Yep.
People don't know that if I wanted to send you money from my Wells Fargo to your Bank of America,
yep,
I either write you a check or I walk into the bank, or I go online.
Which still happens today.
Or I go online and I do a transfer that takes a couple of days to go through. But then in Nigeria, I don't know, I can't remember when this
probably around 2015,
2016.
And
you could do
almost 20 years later, that is still not available in the United States.
And people don't know that.
In the number one economy in the world.
People don't know that.
Supposedly the most technological advanced country in the world. The country with supposedly probably the biggest fintechs in the world.
Yeah.
So really, doff, my hat to, one, definitely the innovators and the builders that have come out of Africa, who have seen the problems and built solutions. And then regulators, as much as, look, we bash them sometimes, they get, we've gotten away with quite a bit, justifiably or not. And they've always, and they are still seeking ways in which they can protect consumers and make sure that they thrive. So, unless there's a lot more to unpack from that, but I think, regulators have a huge part still to play. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Let's go into the next phase of where you're going into now, which is, you're pivoting from serving a consumer base that wants to transfer naira to the pounds or to dollars, or wants to do the reverse, right? And you're pivoting to, hey, you want to go do business in Africa, we can connect you to 1.5 billion people, right? What are you seeing in that future that makes you excited about, doing, pivoting to that? One of the things I'm seeing as I hear you speaking is AY is essentially telling me now that it's easy for me to sell talent, Nigerian talent, to other African countries, whereas that has not really been a focus of ours in the past. So this approach that you're taking, how does it benefit these 1.5 billion people? And do African businesses also get to enjoy the benefits of this?
Yes, and I'm more excited about what it does for African businesses, actually. I think, when we look at the dynamics between Africa as a continent in terms of, the economies and the consumer markets, the lack of financial buying powers and all that stuff relative to the rest of the globe, we're of course very, we can be seen to be quite small. But, and the rest of the world would have a lot more to gain, to win, if they were to open themselves a lot more to Africa. We know that's for sure. But I'm more excited, and that's what we're driving, more global and Africa trade, where global businesses can trade more with sell to consumers in Africa, or trade more with other businesses in Africa. But I'm actually more excited about what we can do to help more businesses in Africa trade with businesses and consumers and customers in other African countries. And that's one of the reasons that has, let's say, motivated this crazy, relocation to Africa. I'm one of the mad, few ones that have made that sort of move back to the continent. But I'm very passionate about it. So I think, a lot of trade, even across Africa today, still relies on the United States dollars, which is quite ridiculous. It is super, super difficult for a merchant in Nigeria to trade with a customer in South Africa, or a merchant in South Africa to sell its goods to a customer in Nigeria or Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire.
I think this makes it worse. That it may be easier to sell to a U.S. customer.
Hell
It's easier for a Nigerian to sell to a U.S. customer than it is to sell to a Ghanaian customer.
Yeah.
And that's the ridiculousness.
It's crazy. Yeah. It is nuts. And so, so we want to change that narrative, because look at EU, there's a block there. They trade with each other. They're their biggest trading partners. You got the US that basically trades with the rest of the world, but these are all blocks that trade a lot with each other. But Africa, we trade more with the outside African economies than we do trading with ourselves. So we need to change that. And I think there's a lot of digital innovation today that gives us that potential. So, I think that's where I think, tech plays a huge part. And that's what we are here to do. So we provide a solution that allows a merchant in South Africa, which is a huge economy, a huge consumer economy on its own, that also produces a lot of its own stuff, doesn't even import that many stuff, but produces a lot of its own stuff. It should and it could sell more to people in Nigeria or Ghana or Kenya and other parts of Africa. But instead, it's only focused on itself because there's issues around, collections of payments, shipping, logistics, and, dealing with various sort of tax regimes across different African countries. And I think that's where we provide a service that sort of streamlines that whole process. We, help to certainly manage things around the FX, liquidity risk. But very, very simply, we provide a solution that allows a merchant or a business in South Africa sell very easily and provide a seamless checkout experience to a customer that's in Nigeria or Ghana or Kenya. And we can do that for a business that's in Nigeria selling to a customer that's in Ghana, or just across the bridge or across.
Let's simplify this, right? I sell Ankara clothing, right?
And which is super awesome traditional wear.
Yeah,
that
I sell Ankara clothing.
The rest of the world now would want to
in Nigeria, right?
Yeah,
but I see that there is high demand of Ankara clothing in South Africa, but that's not a base for Ankara clothing. So and I want to expand my business.
Yep.
Just walk us through.
And that's a super good example, because you know what? Weirdly, Nigeria is actually seen as a leader in fashion in Africa.
Yeah.
In a place like South Africa, I will tell you that the people there absolutely admire the style, the innovation, the creativity of our fashion designers in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Whether they're sort of making sort of more modern Western wears or whether it's the traditional outfits, they are certainly looked upon and admired. But is there an easy way that he can sell
don't
it?
have access.
That he can buy it?
Yeah.
No. And so if you were selling, you had a platform and you were selling some nice ready-to-wear Ankara sort of based wares, you can't easily sell to South Africa. That's where we come in. We can offer a way in which you can get our tech through an API that will allow a South African to come onto your platform and easily check out using a ZAR, which is their local currency. And we will settle you in your preferred currency, whether that's Naira or whatever other currency for country you're in. So it's very simple. We help businesses to expand their potential. So what we would just have done for you there is where you have historically just been selling to Nigeria and you're enjoying this, the few customers that you get in Nigeria, but you have bigger ambitions. You want to sell more, you want to grow your business, and you want to help, expand this, look that of Ankara sort of outfits that the rest of the world wants to see, the rest of Africa wants to see. We give you that opportunity and we give it to you very quickly, enabling you to start selling to the rest of Africa. And I think that's where, I'm very, very excited about in terms of what we can do for, digital businesses.
And I think for me, I like this so much because if you look at the situation of things right now, right, it's a lot more. It's very difficult to even get information on how to even get started in South Africa, right? And I think one of the things I read about where Kyshi is going to now is Kyshi then becomes what they call merchant of record.
Yep.
Can you explain what that means?
Okay, right. Very simply, it places Kyshi as the merchant in those countries. So we've gone ahead and we've set up and incorporated and aggregated various payment processors across various African countries. So we're 5 countries today: Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, and Cote d'Ivoire. In each of those countries, we're there. We've set up institutional incorporations. We've integrated with the local payment service providers as a merchant. What we then are able to do is, through these aggregated payment service providers that we've put on our platform, we can give a single API to a business that could be anywhere that wants to collect payments in those African countries. So essentially, we become your reseller in each of those markets. I mean, it's obviously your product, your platform. Customers come onto your platform to pay for your products, but we are the ones who stand the gap between you and a local sort of presence. So we're the ones in the eyes of those sort of payment processors in those African countries. We are the merchants, while you're, let's say, considered like a sub-merchant. That's what makes it easy for you to just expand into those countries, because you don't have to go and set up individually.
And you extend the idea of merchant of record to, in the service space, employer of record.
Absolutely, 100%. And we've seen that today. The name of the company escapes me today. Absolutely.
Remote.
Absolutely.
Deal and remote, they do employer of record.
Absolutely.
But again, and then they reached out to us and, they partnered with us. And I like it so much that I wanted to jump into it.
Yep.
Right. And if you already have a system that does merchant of record, those same companies may also want to hire African talent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Content creators.
Absolutely.
It could be software developers. It could be anything.
Yep,
right?
Definitely.
So at some point, are you going to start offering those services?
Yeah. So I mean, you've definitely seen my roadmap. So we would consider those as sort of value-added services that we want to offer our merchant clients.
Can I make sales pitch here right now?
Sure. We are brothers. So
all Africa outsources tech talent
also
locally and globally. And we're looking for a platform like that that would be an employer of record for anyone that wants to hire our talents.
Perfect.
That's my sales pitch.
Perfect. So for every kind of, let's say, tech platform or creative platform or a business that needs talent in Africa, we could certainly partner with the ball, whether that's in Nigeria or any other sort of presence that you have in other parts of Africa, to essentially recruit, train, staff up, their operations in those countries. I think a perfect area that we're going to be looking to apply talent, local talent to our clients is an area around, customer service. So when a customer sort of buys a good on an international platform, if they have any issues or questions or queries to do with that sort of good that they purchased, they call a number on that platform website. The number should go to a local sort of attendant, someone that can speak possibly in that customer's language. And so we can help collect or recruit local talent that can help solve that problem. So whether that's in the area of service,
would you be recruiting or you be partner?
Yeah. We would do that either ourselves or partner. More likely partner. I think our core is to facilitate those payments. Do reconciliation, do tax remittances. Settle our merchants. And I think our strength is in mostly the payment technology and the managing of the liquidity and FX, and I think that's where our strength really lies. Those value-added services are, I'd say, non-core, but would be as they're called, value-added services, but one where we definitely would be looking at partnership opportunities.
Fantastic. This has been great, and I think that I've learned a lot, and I think that our listeners will also learn a lot from you, AY. But before we go, you and I have one thing in common, and I think you mentioned it in the course of this conversation, which is you came back because you really believe in this continent, right? Do you ever get those questions? Why you go come back? Right? And
every
time, right?
Every time.
And I like to ask that question because the answer, right, is when people ask me that question, I respond to them saying that there's a reason why this guy came to Nigeria. That guy came to Nigeria, not to come and live here, but hey, when I moved back to Nigeria, the same month I moved back to Nigeria in May 2018, I think that month, the French president came here and said he was investing millions in creative industry. The British Prime Minister was here, also investing in Africa. That same year, Zuckerberg came, also invested in Africa. And I'm like,
exactly.
Why would I stay here?
Exactly.
You
You're obviously seeing something.
So,
yep.
Can you speak to that Jay-Z guy who has put all his hopes on Japan, right? And it's two sets of people.
Yeah.
Because I always encourage people, if you have the opportunity to go, learn something.
Yeah.
Learn a different thing, right? But then the second set of people is for those who have the opportunity to come back. I want you to speak to them.
Okay, right. So I try hard to not sort of bucket, all the listeners to my sort of situation, because mine is maybe like yours a bit, where we spent quite a bit of time in somewhere in the diaspora, whether that's in the UK and the US, and we probably went there from maybe a younger age that people are moving today. Well, I moved to the UK when I was 16. I was barely out of secondary school. In fact, I left after SS2, so I didn't even finish secondary school here. And one could say, oh, you've been there since. You've had that luxury. You've trained, and you've worked in the professional space, and you've done all these things, and that's a fair comment. And that's why I wouldn't judge anyone that was, have always been in Nigeria or in Africa and seeking sort of knowledge, seeking experience, and upskilling and whatever else. Because let's say the rest of the world has maybe a lot that it could add to your skill set. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think a lot of people still come back home eventually. Whether they do that, in their mid to late 30s, or whether they're doing that in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, or maybe when they've even retired. And then they come back and they try to apply some of the stuff that they've learned. It's just really a timing thing. I think, Africa is hard. It's, certainly challenging. It's a difficult place to live in. Those of us that have come back, look, we are bringing expertise. We're bringing resources. We're bringing our network. We're bringing, most importantly, our capacity, our capabilities to really drive the changes, because we've been there, done that, and we've learned from some of the best in the world. And so, look, before I came to Nigeria, I worked for a company that was started off as a small early stage company to becoming a unicorn. And I was there for 14 years. So I've learned a lot in that time. And so, it was then up to me to see how, Africa does need its own several unicorns. With all the challenges that we have, the areas that we're in are one of the biggest challenges that Africa has. So that enough for me was a motivation to come back and look at what those challenges were and really be close to it, to understand how best to solve it. So yes, there is a madness in making that, move back home, but it's been very well thought through. And so, yes, I wouldn't sort of judge anyone that was trying to japa.
It's not easy. So
it's not easy. You could go, you could, learn, whether you're studying, or you could get into a great company that sort of upskills you. You get a massive opportunity to work in a place like Google or Meta or Apple or OpenAI, whatever. And then you learn from maybe some of the best in the world. Then I would love to see more people coming back.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we might have seen a brain drain in the last few years. But, I'm hoping, and this is one of the things that I'm also, hoping to do, is as we build our businesses, let's make it attractive enough for people from the West to come back and come and work with us. Whether they come and work with us as employees, or we mentor them and, or invest in them to, start up their own businesses.
I absolutely agree with you. And lastly, just as we wrap up, I actually don't think we have a japa problem. I think we have a training problem.
Definitely.
Because we have so many people to train.
We have the best, we have the so talented people.
So I always say this, it circles back. The more people leave, the more repeaters will come back. No problem.
Yep.
The more they leave, the more we train more people.
Yep.
Right? We will not feel the effect as much. I think the issue that we have today is that we're not investing enough in education and retraining and retooling our people. But anyways, that's conversation for another day. I just want to say huge thank you. I know we sprung this up on you.
No, this has been good.
It's been very good, very enlightening.
A very sort of, passionate.
We also take questions, by the way. So if
send them in. So
they can respond. Thank you so much.
And been a pleasure.
You have been leveraged.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, man. All good?
How long did you do?
34.